Okay, well, here we are. We're live on the first official episode. This is episode 2, but first official episode of The View. And so we're really excited to host Tony and Brian on this amazing conversation we're going to have about creating a digital vision for digital transformation. So before we get into that, maybe Tony and Brian, do you guys mind just introducing yourselves and we can start there?
Sure. Brian, go ahead.
Sure. So I'm Brian. I'm Director of Operations for a company called Big Steel Box. We're a moving and storage company based headquartered in Western Canada, but we service, trying to get across the whole country, but right now we service from Vancouver Island all the way as far east as Ottawa.
Amazing. And Tony?
Tony Ballas-Subramanian. I'm the SVP of Business Solutions at VistaView. And I had the privilege of working with the senior leadership team at Big Steel Box over several months. I think summer of 2022.
Yep.
Summer and fall of 2022 to help or assist with the creation of kind of a picture of the future for the organization. And it's great to be able to chat about that with Brian now.
And I'm really grateful for both of you spending the time and getting prepped for this and doing this conversation. Brian, I wanted to just start with you really quick because I know one of the brand purposes, or the brand purpose, I should say, that you have is to care for people beyond their expectations, a relationship at a time. With that brand purpose in mind, how do you guys view digital transformation? Like, what is it about digital transformation and your brand purpose that connect together?
Yeah, sure. I think, for us, it's really about allowing our people. We can't deliver on that promise to our customers without the people that we have interacting with them in every single day. And as our business has grown, we realized that we have a lot of analog processes. We have a lot of things that our people have to do that aren't necessarily directly contributing to the fulfillment of that promise. They're just trying to keep the wheels turning in some regard. And so for us, the dream was really about enabling them to stop doing things that could be automated or could live in some other way, in some other process, in some sort of system, and focus their efforts on the things that are actually delivering to our customers an experience that's meaningful and that is tailored to them as an individual and materially impacts their life in a positive way.
Yeah, it's interesting. There's, digital transformation is such a big, broad word, and it's interesting hearing your position about it from a company that's going through this. And Tony, in your role, you've seen all kinds of companies go through different types of digital transformations that have different visions for it. Can you share your perspective on just in general, like the importance of technology in business today and enabling this transformation that is happening that a lot of people are searching for and looking for answers on?
Yeah, so I guess I'd start with saying the choice of technology is not really relevant, but
right.
What technology offers in the exercise of transforming your business is an ability to support a business model, right? So defining what that business model is or what new things or methods you want to approach the market with, technology has done a great job of actually accelerating that, making it more available for companies of all sizes, right? In the past, it would be that very large companies could operate in different markets, right? So the internet is a market, or online is a market, bricks and mortar or stores is a market. So that used to be the purview of large companies that could actually express themselves in all of those markets through how customers would connect to them. And so what technology has done is equalize that field. I can be a mom and pop company and have a digital presence that allows me to engage online at the same level that a Nestle or a big organization, multinational global organization can do. So I think what's really important is technology, as you said, is an enabler for the marketplace and for customers. But understanding what you're trying to enable, which is where Big Steel Box came to us. They had a good picture, they wanted to do more, but wanted to articulate that in a better way, right? So.
Yeah, and in terms of that enabling, Brian, do you see digital transformation differently from business transformation, or are they the same thing, or are they kind of two sides of the same coin, or?
Yeah, it seems to me that one sort of begets the other. I think you can't. Whenever you adopt any kind of a new technology, I think the temptation is always to try to make it work with the way the business currently operates. And I can tell you from firsthand experience from that mistake that is not a real great path, and one that you will not enjoy once you've made your way down it. So for us, as we've worked through a little bit of this digital transformation, we have a sense of our solution stack now. We're working through the next steps. Actually, as we're doing this, other members of the VistaView team are with my team, mapping our processes out right now, along with some other vendors, and we're in the midst of it right now. But for us, it's definitely going to change the way our business looks and operates. It'll change the way that our processes happen. It'll change probably some internal structuring stuff. It's going to have an impact, right across the whole business. And in truth, I think it's probably pretty important that whenever you step into something like this, that you do sort of elevate it up to that sort of level, to give it that sort of weight, if you will, because then if you do that, then it's no longer just a project that you're doing off the side that's going to change some softwares. It's going to be about how is it that we're going to use this platform to enable our people to deliver our brand promise, as we we're talking about earlier, to fulfill our corporate purpose. You've got to tie all those decisions back into your values, into how it is you want to craft your employee experience as well as your customer experience. And I think the risk could be, I have a sample set of one, so maybe you guys might have a better answer than this, but the risk could be that if you don't elevate it to that level, that you don't give those decisions, that you don't have as much rigor around that decision-making process in a program that really is going to change the way the business operates.
Yeah.
Anything to add to that, Tony?
Yeah, I would agree wholeheartedly with Brian. There are statistics out there, whether it's from PMI or Gartner or Forrester or any of the major thinking houses or strategy houses, that talk about large percentages of projects failing because of a lack of executive engagement or executive alignment. So Brian's talking about those things, right? One of the greatest elements of this, for me, having been around the IT industry for so many years, maybe 35 years, Big Steel Box had a very senior, seasoned leader in the IT seat. And so that leader actually brought us to the table to start the discussion about technology, about roadmaps, about exercises, and had set up the business to understand this was a bigger than a bread box and alignment was important, right?
Right.
So the opportunity to engage with a senior leadership team in a business isn't always available, because this is IT, and IT is a black box with a blinking light in the back room that should blink at the same rate all the time, right? And a lot of senior leadership teams leave it like that off to the side. At Big Steel Box, the team actually embraced the idea that, hey, maybe there's more we should understand about the technology. Maybe we should bend it to our will, right? Which is creating a vision of the future really is saying, yeah, technology can do all of these things, but we're going to bend it to our will as a business. Right. And we're going to drive the technology to do what we want, right? Which is important.
Yeah, it's interesting, because as you're saying that, and both of you guys were making me think, like, digital transformation is a big ethereal kind of like topic, and it's almost like it's an end goal in some cases for some people. Oh, we check the box, we're on the path of digital transformation. But from what you're saying, Brian, to me it seems more like the objective is competitiveness and delivering on the brand. There's an outcome in linking it to what Tony was saying. Technology is the enabler that allows you to do that and remain competitive. And so a lot of companies, I would assume, have all kinds of technology. And so it creates a more cohesive thought process and how these things work together to create the competitiveness. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I think it's a great way to put it. I think we're talking about a very specific thing, this idea of business or digital transformation. But the truth is that very few businesses that have been in existence for any amount of time have not experienced some level of transformation. It's just been gradual and maybe accidental. And they find themselves in a place where there's sort of this collection of a whole bunch of decisions that were made over an unknown amount of time. And that comes with maybe some inefficiencies and some positive things. They've probably figured out what their competitive advantage is. Like there's good in there too. But I think really this is about the intentionality of saying, how do we want to represent ourselves in the marketplace? How do we want to deliver for our customers? and let's talk about how it is we're going to use technology to enable us to do that in the best possible way.
Mm-hmm.
But it's really just taking ownership over the transformation process that you would probably go through anyways. It's just with a lot more intentionality, purpose, and direction.
Yeah, I like that word, the intentionality component of it. You know, at VistaView, we've got a number of different services and whatnot that we were able to offer. ERPs is one of the core solutions, and as you said, Tony, it's not about like any particular technology, but maybe I'm oversimplifying it. I imagine there's lots of companies that exist that have an ERP in place, and so I kind of think of that as like plumbing in a lot of ways for information and flowing from one area of business or one vendor into another and making it visible. So that you have, let's say, an implementation, it doesn't necessarily mean that you've completed a transformation. Is that fair? Am I thinking of ERPs the right way?
Yeah, I mean, you know, the reality is an ERP typically touches almost every area of a business in some way. And so, you know, the way we as an organization think about ERP is that, you know, you need to implement that ERP, then you need to stabilize it, and then finally you need to actually optimize that ERP. And the optimized portion of doing that is where you're actually tailoring it to the business, right? And so what unfortunately happens is when an organization buys technology, maybe I'll step back and I'll say, you know, we all use the, you know, word processing software, right? Whether it's Google or whether it's Microsoft or maybe something else, we all use it. But we all use about 5% of that software. And then there's probably a 5% that each of us use that's in the other 95% of the software, right? And so ERP is just like that. It has this 100% of capability, and every group uses their 5%. When you start to think about transformation, and, you know, again, bringing it back to Big Steel's box example, you know, Brian talked about the people, right?
Right.
The people in the organization, how the people serve the customer, how we're going to make it easier for the people. When organizations think like that, then we're actually thinking about what's in it for me, for each individual in the organization. And so transformation is about people changing the way they do things, being supported by tools and technologies to be able to deliver a different outcome for customers. And so, you know, it was fertile ground to go in and work with Big Steel Box because they were already thinking about people. The organization, you know, has clarity on almost every third or fourth desk of what the values of the organization are, how that impacts customers, what the strategic priorities are. And so in that space, connecting to the people and how the technology is going to support them to support the clients, that was easier, right? Some organizations are journeying down the road to do all of those things. And typically these things start with technology, right? Something is not working, something is painful. And Brian would have heard this several times. I'm going to run away from that, or something is beautiful and I'm going to run towards that beautiful end state. Big Steel Box came to us and said, can you help us understand what that beautiful picture looks like? Our IT leader said, and help me align my executive team so that everybody sees the same beautiful picture so that they can be engaged in this program. And my understanding is from my inside sources, Brian, that you guys are very focused on that alignment today and being there to get this off the ground, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
Brian, I don't know if you could comment on that, but like the difference between running away from pain or versus running toward something that's beautiful, is that in terms of, you know, creating a path to a transformation. Does that resonate with you? Is that something that like you can comment on?
Yeah, and I think in some ways, you know, both have their place. I think running away from the issues you might be having with the current system and whatnot is it helps kind of drive a little bit of that impetus to say like, man, this is frustrating. We need to get this working better. I think the struggle though is if you don't know what you're running towards, I mean, you're not really too confident where you're going to end up, right? And I think I actually want to say it was Tony that says if you don't know where you're going, the road will take you there. And I think like we just wanted to be intentional about what road we were getting on and what the North Star that we were chasing after looked like. And I think that is where people start to get excited. That's where you start owning your brand promise and saying, this is what it looks, this is what we want to actually deliver to our customers. This is the stance that we want to carve out in the marketplace. The business, if there's some danger around talking about business versus IT. So, but if you'll apologize that for this conversation,
sure.
or give me grace for that, we needed to provide our IT group. This is where we're trying to go. This is what we need to do. This is who we are as a company. This is who we're trying to serve and how we're trying to serve them. And then they helped guide us through this process that also brought us into connection with VistaView to sort of say, like, we need, now that we understand all of those pieces, let's talk about what technology can actually enable and what it can actually do for you, right? But without that clarity on the end goal, you're so focused on what you're running away from that you're not actually totally in line on where it is you're going. And I think the last thing, Tony, when you were just talking, that it made me think about is the benefit that this has also had and is having and will continue to have, I believe, into the execution of this plan. Because Tim, who's our CEO, he always says that a mediocre strategy or mediocre plan executed very well will always outperform an excellent strategy that's executed with mediocrity. And the thing is, because we're all aligned, because we took the time, and it did sort of feel like we were slowing down for a second to do this visioning work with VistaView, because we were kind of ready to start to jump into some stuff. But by taking that time, we now are executing, I believe, way better. We're all aligned. We can sense when something that we're talking about is in conflict with where we said we were trying to go. And it makes those conversations, those decisions much faster. And we're actually moving quicker, better, because we took the time to do the work earlier.
Yeah, I had flashbacks to the Cheshire Cat from Alice in Wonderland popping in my head when you were saying that. If you don't know which path you're going, any road will get you there. Tony, I've heard you describe that as the digital vision, which is partly, is the reason why, big reason why we're talking today. And Brian's a living example of that vision process that you've gone through. So I'm wondering if you can talk about the importance of a digital vision. What is it? Like, everyone's heard of digital transformation, but it almost is like, okay, so what? like Brian said, we've got all these tools, we've got all these systems, but it's almost in some ways like the tail wagging the dog. So where does the digital vision fit in?
Well, I think it's important to say that there's a lot of buzzwords in and around the technology landscape, marketplace, vendors, publishers, right? Everybody's got a different buzzword that means something different. What's important is to actually land on what does it mean for the organization that's trying to build it, right? And so, some people say a digital vision is a strategy that is articulated that includes technological components, right? So it's a one-pager like your mission or your vision statement for your organization. Other people will say, like a city or an airport, that it's something that supports the digitization of all the processes that you're going to work on in an organization. So working with the leadership team and working at Big Steel Box and with their IT leader, Daniel, we were able to kind of land on what would be meaningful to Big Steel Box, right? I mean, in marketing, so marketing is, talks about customer journeys, and that's kind of the articulation of the state that you're trying to achieve, right? And so that's what we're trying to do when we talk about a digital vision, is articulate the end state that we're trying to achieve. Now, for Big Steel Box, what it turned out to be was, synthesizing the feelings, desires, knowledge, and expertise of the senior leadership team, right? Learning from them about their business, and then bringing to them knowledge, capacity, information, understanding, right, about technology and what's possible, and then articulating that through story, right? And that story was articulated in a way to talk about, what does it look like for the CEO, and what does it look like for the head of sales, or the chief revenue officer, or the person responsible for operations, or HR, and some conscious decisions were made about where we're going to focus, right, through that process. And in the end, what was really important to Big Steel Box was, how do they interact with their customer, and what's the story about people who are interacting with their customer, and then again, how do they interact with their customer, but at a location where a customer might be interacting with them in a bricks and mortar environment. And so those two big stories really helped them land on, I think, help the IT team facilitate a discussion about technologies, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because I want this outcome. I want a customer to experience this story, and I want my people, as Brian said, to understand or to feel like they're enabled to have the customer experience that story. So in Steelbox's case, that the person answering the phone and at the store and maybe even at the executive table or the leadership table all know what's going on with the customer real time. That was an important thread, right, that came out through all the discussions and working sessions. And so having understood all of that, then decisions about the technology that would make that able to happen could be made, right? And then it becomes a game of puts and takes, as the accountants would say, right? We can afford this, we want to do that, we can only do so much. Oh, our people can't actually absorb all of the change that we're talking about, so we'll have to phase it out. And so IT in the organization really helped drive kind of how much can we consume. But the business said, this is the big picture. Understanding that big picture, can we make really good decisions now that aren't going to stop us in the future, right?
Right.
And I think that's what was important. Brian, did I get that?
Yeah, no, I think that was really excellent. And I think the only other, I was reflecting just as you were talking, and I maybe just want to reiterate it because it meant a lot to us. I'm sure there's a lot of ways for that you can develop and deliver a digital vision. And you talked about how for us, it looked like stories, right? And this might be cultural to us. I'm not sure if every organization will be the same way, but for us, the power of those stories has actually been really significant. Storytelling as a change agent and as a tool for generating alignment in our environment has been just extremely powerful. And we've shared that document with a lot of different stakeholders. We shared it with our board and our shareholders. We shared it with other employees in the company. And it's only ever been received extremely well and with a high level of excitement, and notably with people then coming to us and saying, hey, like when we know this was before the project actually had sort of quote unquote kicked off, if you know what I mean, in terms of implementation, people coming up and after seeing that document, understanding what we were picturing, asking like, how could they be involved? How can they help make this thing happen and make it a reality? And as a change agent, that was a very powerful tool for us.
I want to dig into that a little bit, if you don't mind, Brian, because well, and Tony too. But I mean, like my instinct would be, let's build a deck, put a bunch of charts and numbers in there, probably a whole bunch of bullet points, and and show some kind of an ROI. And so that I think is probably a pretty typical, like sort of build a business case essentially around that. But you're literally speaking about stories, from my understand. Like there's a scenario where you've written out almost like a story. Like I don't know how to say it any other way.
Yeah,
it's just a story about a person. Yeah, prose. Yeah.
Yeah.
So why is it that you think that's been such an effective tool on your end, Tony or Brian? And then Tony, to you after Brian, maybe like why, from your perspective, is it useful as a way to communicate?
Yeah, so for us, I think it helped us understand what the emotional output of the bullet points and the ROI that you were talking about was going to look like, right? We could understand how our customers were going to have a better experience because one of the stories they wrote, I mean, Tony talked about from the CEO's perspective, and I think you had our director of sales playing golf with Walmart or something like that, right? And he loved that part of the story. But the reality is you also told a story from like our customer's perspective, and you told a story from like our finance team's perspective, and everyone with a various role could sort of see how it is this was going to generate a better overall experience. And that it's not that we didn't have to get to the place where we had bullet points and ROI and of course the benefits and costs, all that stuff was part of the overall decision matrix. But understanding that added a level of weight and power to those bullet points that we wouldn't have had if we had just started there. Right.
So it's almost like as you're saying that it's like creating that empathy for whatever the stakeholders are within the system, and seeing this.
I totally think that, and it also tells the story of the technology in a manner that everyone can understand. I've learned more words working with your guys' team in the last year than I have in a long time. I didn't know half the stuff that we're talking about now, right? 12 months ago, I could not have had this conversation in any intelligible way. And so we can't take everyone through that exact same process and that same level of depth. So really what it did was it kind of took the world of the technology and what we are proposing it created or will create, and we were giving it to people in a manner that they could consume and internalize, aligned to their own sense of values and purpose and what they wanted, the value they want to bring to the organization, and understand how that was going to help them.
And then from your end, Tony, like what's the, I want to say, rationale for using a story? I mean, obviously it works in this case, but like, how did you think of stories as a vehicle for this information?
Yeah, so I have a bit of a bee in my bonnet around traditional consulting. And I think traditional consulting is really focused on head-led work, right? I have a model, I have a format, I have a method by which I do things, and I focus my energy in that space, and I drive to a conclusion. But it's a head-led model, right? It's logical, it's intellectual, it's driving that way. I think, and then there's other consultants, strategy consultants. I think they really focus on a gut-led model, right? They make logical leaps based on years and years of experience, and people who are tremendously smart, probably way smarter than I, they make a decision about where a market or an industry or something is going, and that's gut-led. And then, but when you're dealing with people, right? Whether it's customers, whether it's your employees, whether it's trying to connect something to somebody else, that's heart-led, right? You need to get a connection that's meaningful to that individual, and you need to address what's in it for me, right? And that me is every person that this needs to connect to. So the purpose of writing stories from the perspective or through the eyes of each individual or each area in an organization, the purpose of that is to actually have that person see. And it's great to hear that the net result at the end has allowed that connection and that kind of heart-tied connection to what the business wants to do. Because it's what we all want to do, right? It's what we want to do at VistaView when we talk about customer experience, right? We want to be there for our people. We want our people to be there for our customers. And that's all driven not from the head or the gut, but from the heart, right? By the purpose. And why and stories in general, for me, stories are important because when I grew up with my grandmother, who didn't speak English as well as I didn't speak Hindi, like in that environment, listening to her stories taught me about who I am. And what we're trying to achieve in a digital vision is helping the organization writ large, from the CEO through the factory worker, or in this case the forklift driver, at a location, see who they are, right? And why they are the way they are, right? So the customers, why they are the way they are, and the story about what they do and how it links back to that is super important. So, and that's not all. I didn't go in thinking that's the way we were going to do it at Big Steel Box. I had a pretty good understanding of what we wanted to do, but culturally, Big Steel Box, all I heard from the time I went there was the stories of what went well, the stories of what didn't work, the story from yard supervisors, the stories from salespeople, right? And so they spoke in stories. You spoke in stories, your organization, Brian. So how do you speak to an organization that speaks in stories? You tell stories, right? So that's why.
Yeah, Brian, from your end, do you remember like the original reaction to, like, let's say, let me role play for a second. I'm Tony. I come to you a year ago. Hey, we're gonna work with you on producing a story. Like, what was your reaction on that? I imagine it's just different.
Yeah, it was probably a couple of different things almost at the same time. I don't have a reputation for being an insanely patient person, and I by this point we were a year into our work, and I was just really chomping at the bit to get started. But in truth, I was an easy sell. The importance of getting alignment within our executive team and then within the people who would actually help us do this was just very obvious. And coming back to something we talked about before, like we all understood that if if all we were going to do was try to fix the issues we had and
Right.
run away from the system that we were using and didn't have a really clear sense of what we were running towards, that it was unlikely that we were going to end up with something that we truly loved, that our customers and our people truly loved, and that was enabling the business in the manner that we wanted it to, that had any level of intentionality around, you know, our position in the market and all the other stuff we talked about. So it was obvious that we had to get real clear on what it is we were targeting. And like I said, it was a bit of a slowdown. We had to do a bit of a stutter step to do the work, but I believe now that we're, you know, kind of just mid-flight and execution phase here, that we are moving at a pace that we couldn't have otherwise moved at had we not taken the time to get this alignment.
There's a guy I used to do some work with who at one point said to me, which I thought sounded so strange. He's like, sometimes you got to go slow to go fast, which sounds like one of those moments for you guys where the alignment part was such an important component. And going slow at that meant you could really go fast once you got that alignment.
100%.
Yeah, this was Mark, this was a huge investment in time from the organization.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah,
and,
sure.
And, you know, it really sounds like it was me, but I was facilitating the process. It was really the leaders at Big Steel Box, right? Giving them time, engaging in the conversations. We operated like a facilitator of those conversations, but it was also, you know, experts in the technologies, right? Some from us, others that came and joined the organization during the work, right? That became members of the organization, bringing their expertise and talking about what's possible with the technologies. And that's a big exercise in learning, understanding, agreeing, and building the capacity of everyone around you to be the same as yours.
Yeah.
Right? And that was a massive investment in time, and quite frankly in dollars for Big Steel Box to do. But obviously we're hearing it was well worth it, and they're marching into what is an even bigger, much more significant investment of dollars with clarity, right? Because you'll spend the money if you plan or if you don't plan. But if you plan, you'll get what you want at the end of it, right?
Yeah. Brian, you the brand promise you guys have, I don't know if you can recite it. I have it here if you want me to read off of it, but
the brand promise in front of you, or the purpose?
Or sorry, the brand promise. That one was the one I was interested in, because to me, I mean, I'll just say it. It's to provide an exceptional moving and storage experience that feels better, by reducing the customer's effort, owning their problem, and caring more than they expect. And I mean, I think it's a really great, noble promise. And as a marketer, I'm reading that going, oh, that's a great brand promise, and like, who wouldn't love that? But it sounds to me like, you know, take my marketer hat off for a second. It sounds like a lot of this digital vision is about operationalizing that, so that it can be true for the customer, whether they see it on an ad or on a wall painted somewhere, so that they feel it, as it's not just words on a page somewhere. Is that like fair to say that that's where really this investment went into, is making it real?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and you know, we, as a moving and storage company, we intersect with people's lives in very transitional points, right? They're moving, they're downsizing. Sometimes that's for really great reasons, and truthfully, sometimes it's for really tragic reasons or just sad reasons. But no matter what, their world is in some way disrupted. And so where we see an opportunity is to come in and to deliver an experience that understands that they're living a story right now that, positive or negative, is going to generate some level of stress. No one talks about how stress-free and amazing their move was. Right? Even if it was a good move, even if it went pretty well as moves go, they're not saying it was the best thing I ever did. It was like sleeping. It's like I was on a beach in Hawaii. So we understand that if we can come in and we can differentiate ourselves and provide an experience that takes the burden onto us and say, look, this is what we do. You can trust us with all of your worldly belongings, and we will care for you as you move from here to there and get through this transition. Then we think that's a different experience that's not commonplace in that industry. I think what this is all about is about giving the customer the ability to interact with us in points in time and through mechanisms that is completely at their discretion. They now can come and interact with us on their terms. They can get the information that they need that makes them feel safe, makes them trust us. And our people, like I said before, are not bogged down with processes that aren't really value add to the organization or are very analog in nature and just take a lot of work to get through. And, you know, we have some of the best out this door are some of the best people you'll ever meet who really want to care for other people. And it's one of our values as an organization. We genuinely care for others. Like it's a thing that we want to do. And really, in a lot of ways, this is going to get rid of some of the other stuff so that they can focus on that. And I'm really excited to see how that all plays out when we get through this phase.
Yeah, it sounds exciting. Just in terms of when creating a digital vision, Tony, I wanted to ask you about like things that you should consider, and Brian, from your end as well, like, you know, looking back at it with the experiences that you have had, you know, things that you think are where like, check, that was awesome, or, you know, maybe we should have done something a little bit differently that way. Just retrospective almost on creating a digital vision.
Yeah, you go, Brian.
I was going to say you go. I wanted to think for half a second.
Yeah, it's okay.
I can ask some longer question and just come back to you guys.
It's good. I think it's always about the raw materials that you have access to when you're working with a customer, right? And oftentimes, as you know, consultants that are privileged to work with customers, sometimes we're not given the time, right, to be able to do all the work that is required. But one of the most amazing things, and I think Brian said it about the people, like, it didn't matter who I talked to, they knew what the company was about. Right? It's an experiment I've done my whole career, walking into customers' offices, is talking to people in the elevator, asking them what they do, trying to understand. And the level of consistency of knowledge associated with it at Big Steel Box was high, right? Like higher than I've seen in a long time in my career. And then working with the executive team or the leadership, I think you guys call yourself the senior leadership team, you know, to a person, there was a large degree of alignment as well. And so, you know, that's great raw material, right? People who are interested, engaged, and are willing to spend the time. And so one of the things that really worked for us was, you know, there's two or three things, but the first is they had a leader in their IT organization that understood that alignment was really important and that they needed a picture of where they were going to go. Good reasons or bad reasons, that person understood that and brought someone in to help with that, right? Then when we came in, it wasn't like it was pulling teeth from people to try to understand where they wanted to be. Everyone was passionate about sharing their vision of the future. So as consultants, you know, we don't make stuff up, right? We actually learn from the customer at their request and on their dime, and then we help the customer by bringing additional value. The additional value we brought was, hey, this is what a program like this or a project like this looks like, right? And oh, by the way, this is what's happening in the world of technology and how that might be relevant to your business. On the even better if we had more expertise as an organization, meaning VistaView, in the moving and storage space, you know, to do it again, I would try to find somebody who had that expertise and attach them to the team, because maybe we could have added a little more of that knowledge into what's the future of that industry.
Sure.
Right? So that would be an even better if. But taking all of that stuff and then having people who are willing to learn about technology, and don't take this the wrong way, but many leadership teams and organizations, technology is just something that happens over there. Just make it work is a pretty common feeling, right? That they have. That was not the case here, right? From the CEO all the way through the head of finance, everybody was focused on I need to understand what's possible. And so we were able to give them something about what was possible within the context of our expertise and knowledge. And then to take all of that together and go through a process of, you know, unpacking their brand promise. What does that really mean? How would you prioritize these things? All of that exercise took a lot of time and a ton of investment of senior people in a business that, you know, was running. And I think the last thing I would say is, it's not like Big Steel Box isn't doing great things and growing rapidly today, right?
Right.
They are.
Right.
But this process is going to take away the friction, right, that exists for people to go even faster or to do even more for the customer, right? And that was the mindset that I learned pretty quickly from the CEO and the head of sales and even from marketing, that that's what they were after. And for a, I don't know if you call yourself a small or a big company, Brian, but for a company of your size, you know, there was a lot of sophisticated things going on in the call center, in sales, in marketing. To get it to go to be better really was a great push. And in the middle of my back, how am I going to make this? How am I going to help them be better, right? Because there's a lot of things going well, and it's growing at a massive rate already, right? So we can only hope that at the end of all of this, the benefits that were identified are seen in spades. So.
And from your end, Brian, looking back at it, was there like lessons learned from your perspective in terms of the project and the visioning? And
yeah, I think there's probably, well, at least one I can think of right now. Maybe I'll invent another one as I go along. But I think for us, what Tony was just mentioning is very much true for us. We didn't really have the quote unquote burning platform, right? We've been growing. That's top line, bottom line. We've been scaling, we've been making acquisitions, expanding, all that stuff. I think though, what we realized was that the things that had driven our success to this point were not going to be the same things that would continue to support success going into the future. And we had to come to terms with the fact that although a lot of things are working well right now, and there's some things in the current platform that really weren't, and there was for sure was some pain there, but it wasn't like we were staring down the barrel of any kind of gun. And it wasn't like IT was coming to us and saying, hey, your current ERP is no longer being supported and being discontinued. And so, you've got 6 months. Exactly. We had none of that. Right. But what we needed was to get a good handle on where we were trying to go. And I think that the lesson learned that, to his credit, Tony was waving this flag in front of my face long before the visioning work actually started, was we also didn't have a really clear understanding of the processes that we were leaning on to drive the business today. We hadn't really taken the time to go through and understand on a detailed level, the current business processes that we operate on. And in a lot of ways, our business is, again, a lot of growth, sort of entrepreneurial in nature. A lot of those processes had evolved and been created by people out there actually doing the work. And a lot of us in the executive level didn't have any clue what they're doing. And I think we could have, in coming back to the business's responsibility to feed good inputs into these kinds of processes, we could have provided better information into the development of some of this work had we taken that time earlier. And I just didn't prioritize it. I didn't give it the weight that it probably deserved. I didn't push hard enough on getting that to where it needed to be. And as a result, we're doing it now.
But some of that I'm sure is like, you don't know what you don't know. And so, with retrospect, it's easy to say that, but probably harder in the moment to go, oh, I need to do this A through Z.
Yeah, you're always making decisions the best you can in the moment with the info you have, right? But looking back now, having the benefit of that hindsight, if I was to undertake another one of these, hopefully not for a long time, I would be definitely making sure that we captured some of that information, because it's only gonna result in a better output at the end of it. It's the business has to provide all of this information into the IT groups so that they can then come back to us with excellent solutions, which we're fortunate that they, despite us, our IT group really did. And a lot of that was because of the help that Tony and Jason were doing and others. But, I think we could have been to where we got to faster had I been a bit more on the ball with that. And that's definitely a lesson I'm taking away into the future.
Well, you mentioned something about acquisitions that you have been growing and HR departments and creating some solutions that they've created. Every department probably is that way. I know from a marketing perspective anyway, like there's a ton of data that I sit on. And so I imagine to some degree, there's like pools of information, particularly related to customers, that you didn't even know existed in some cases until you went through something like this.
Oh yeah. I think we might be single-handedly keeping Excel afloat over here. Like we've got spreadsheets about our spreadsheets. And yeah, and I think it's going to be really interesting when we get to that point of the process. You know, like we're talking a little bit earlier about ERP, and I think any business that has an ERP has to understand, I think, that everything sort of starts and stops with the ERP. It doesn't even matter how weighted that specific software, I think, is in your stack. It has to be able to take the information that's being fed in from wherever,
right,
and provide that back to us in a usable format so that we can make really great decisions, right? And you know, I think that's going to be a really healthy exercise for us to get our data to that point. Literally yesterday, I raised a big alarm bell with one of our accountants about something I saw in a spreadsheet I was working on, and I got an email back that said, "Put your cursor in that cell and hit F2, and it'll fix your formula, and you'll be fine." And you know, so like that stuff just happens, and I think having the data in a good usable fashion in a platform that can then give it back to us so we can make great decisions is going to be a game changer for us for sure.
Yeah. Just to extend that conversation a little bit with you, Tony, the integration component, is that a component, like thinking about all these pools of data that exist around the company, is that a component of the digital visioning as well? Or is that like a phase 2 or phase 4 or phase whatever?
No, it needs to be thought about at the beginning, right? And you know, fortunately, there was a talented IT team at Big Steel Box, right? They were thinking about the integration and how that would work. And you know, in today's world, at the end of the day, Big Steel Box chose to go down the road with 2 platforms, right? SAP is one of the platforms, and more of a front end operations platform that's out in front of the customer that leverages portals, et cetera. So, you know, the platform vendors all have integration capabilities of their own. What is, again, important is understanding what it is you want the outcomes to be from the technology, right? So in Big Steel Box's outcomes, it was for the call center agents, it's for the store managers, the people doing operations, finance. And so looking at it from those lenses, what you're integrating are the things that individuals or roles within the organization need to see to be able to do what they need to do to meet the promise that the organization is making to their customers, right? Now I can breathe after saying all that. So you know, at the end of the day, integration just becomes a part of the process, right? And so you know, I mean, maybe it sounds bad coming from an SVP at an organization that sells every flavor of SAP, but the reality is the technology is not the critical component. The why you're using the technology and what you need it to do is what's critical. And almost every technology platform out there at the level of an SAP is capable of doing most of what you need. Right? And so it really becomes about the uniqueness of your business and how you handle that. And Big Steel Box really wound up focusing on the things that were unique about their business. Brian talked about it from a process perspective and kind of a debate around how processes were structured in the organization that we had along the way. And that's all true. But ultimately that crux, that discussion around organizational structure and ownership of process actually drove a solution that put a lot of those processes in one system, not across multiple systems, right? And so those decisions are really about integration and where processes should sit are really driven out of the outcomes that you're looking for. And I think if there's any message for, you know, customers other than Big Steel Box, it's that those are the things that are important.
Right.
And good providers, good systems integrators, good consultants are going to focus on those things and then distill out from that what technology you should use to solve the problem, because they're just tools, right? So
I was, as you were saying that, I was thinking back to the stories and you know, the story, the personas, I'll call them personas, of these individual people.
That's exactly what we spoke about.
Yeah, and so I imagine even as you're talking about, you know, integrations in the future, I mean, you could probably reference some of those over the next couple of years, Brian, in terms of like, okay, well, let's look at that persona and go from that person's perspective, the customer's perspective. what kinds of integrations allow us to make the person feel, I'm trying to have visual, but I like this, my hand is a persona. They allow us to make the person feel that way. And then you kind of go through all your other options and you could almost create this checklist of priorities. Is that fair?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. I have got to confess, I'm not a huge expert on how the integrations themselves will work, but I'm just
for sure. Yeah, any subsequent projects. I mean,
yeah, and it's a great tie back, because I do think that at the end of the day, those personas, right, that was created, and the goal that we set for ourselves in terms of this is where we're trying to head, that serves as sort of a check and balance against the decisions we're making and why we're making them, and it allows us to then really just come back to that always and say, are we implementing this now in a way that is delivering the vision that we said we wanted to deliver? And if we're not, because sometimes you learn things along the way, right? Maybe that vision changes, right? But if we're not, then let's make that decision eyes wide open with some intentionality, and then that's fine. And we'll this thing will evolve and move a little bit as we get down the road. I'm pretty sure that when we finally do go live with our phase 1 implementation, that it's probably not going to look exactly like we thought it was going to look 3 months ago.
Yeah.
But we're heading in the direction, and we'll just take the steps necessary to get there.
Right.
Yeah, and this is a multi-phase project, right? Like it's intended to be.
Yeah, we're 3 phases, I think, over 4 years. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's really important, at some level, the way to check in would be to go back and go, okay, is this persona, maybe the finance persona, is this persona going to get what they need if we choose to do this?
Right.
And it's the responsibility of the person who holds that role today to constantly be in talking about that. And, I think one of the really important things that Big Steel Box made a decision on and let me know early was, business leaders, functional area leaders that are interacting with the customer are going to be the top decision makers of the program. Like everybody uses different language to talk about how you organize a structure around a project or a program. So irrelevant of that, it wasn't going to be about IT, right? And not because IT will make bad decisions, but it's because IT shouldn't be put in the position to have to make those decisions because they're not in front of the customer in most organizations.
Right.
Right. And it's so important because it's impossible for one group to serve multiple masters, right? Effectively. There's always a compromise. And IT is unfortunately in that position when you're dealing with these things that span an organization. And in order to avoid them being put in that conflict position and make the best technical decision, which isn't always the best business decision, lead these things through third parties. You lead them through senior people in the organization that are focused on the customer and the outcomes. And I think early on, Big Steel Box made those decisions, and I think those were good decisions that made it easy, right, to not have negative or non-business forward decisions being made, right?
The last question I had for both of you guys is I found this quote from I don't know if Aaron Levine is still the CEO of Box, but anyway, it was contributed to Aaron Levine, saying that the last 10 years of IT have been about changing the way people work, and the next 10 years will be about transforming the business overall. And so I just thought that was kind of an interesting comment. With that idea and the digital vision in hand, I'm curious, like Brian, what is exciting about the next 10 years for you, and sort of whether it's bringing this digital vision to life or in general about the Big Steel Box?
Yeah, I think the opportunity in front of us is, within our industry. I'm really just talking about sort of the industry we operate in is still quite massive. We talk about the growth we've experienced, but relative to the amount of work being done in the moving and storage industry in Canada, there's a lot more opportunity for us to grow. I think there's a lot more opportunity for us to expand in our actual physical points of presence across the country. There's also a lot of opportunity for us to be more effective at capturing business in the markets we're already in. And the reality is that we've kind of gotten to a place where we've used up all the scalability in the business. We need more people to do more things. And what I love about the project that we're going through right now is that we're going to shift the ratio there. We're going to completely change the game in terms of the way that we build scalability back into the business. we're absolutely building efficiencies into it, but there is no world where we are entertaining. Some companies, they go on a big efficiency gain project and then they do layoffs because they don't need those people anymore. That is not even a consideration for us, because really what it is, it's about saying, we're going to build a scale into the business and then we're going to go and grab it. And to us, I think that's really exciting. I think seeing our people genuinely feel like they can actually work towards our purpose now, and not feel like they're trying to correct errors or deal with, like these analog processes I've been referencing, but to go home at the end of every day and feel like the work that you put in actually tied back to a purpose that you believe in and you're excited about, that you made someone's life better, that you did a good thing today, you intersected in someone who was moving and they were stressed, and at the end of it they said, man, I can't believe how easy this is going to be, I'm so excited for that. That's gonna pump our people's tires like better than anything possibly could.
Sure.
And I'm just excited to see all of that, come to life. I'm not naive enough to think that on day one we're going to flick the switch and it's going to be perfect, but but we'll keep taking steps in that direction, and I'm excited to see how that plays out.
That's amazing. Tony, have you got any thoughts about that?
Yeah, I think the next 10 years around these types of things are super exciting for all the reasons we hear about, kind of when we talk about trends, right? Artificial intelligence, machine learning, all of those things that we talk about in technology rely on a good understanding and expression of the data that your business operates on, right? So while we were talking about this vision and design, the IT team was talking about the data and putting it in one place and being able to have easy access, et cetera. So over time, I'm sure that roles that people play within Big Steel Box, and probably many other companies in the industry, right? Knowledge work is a good example, right? What is knowledge work? Well, it's the synthesization of information, data into ideas, taking things from data to knowledge to understanding to to ultimately to some wisdom or decision-making process, right? And so I think in the world of technology, as it shifts, I think having your data organized, having things in structured ways, having things defined, jobs that don't exist today will exist, and they'll exist at Big Steel Box, they'll exist at other companies, and jobs that exist today will cease to exist. And that's opportunity for people, right? For people to learn, grow, invest in their energy and the business they're operating in, et cetera. Those are huge opportunities for personal growth. And personal growth drives everything, right? People get better at things, and it drives everything that happens because people can get engaged at a higher level. So I think that's what I'm excited for. I mean, for Big Steel Box, I'm excited that they'll get to a place where, there'll be alignment between the brand promise and what's happening inside the organization. That's easy to work with, as opposed to simply being done through horsepower and human effort, right?
Yeah.
And then ultimately, being able to offer more opportunities to people. Like we haven't even scratched the surface of how Big Steel Box brings people through university, gives them great roles with great earning potential. Like, I mean, I just want to go back and visit with the peeps that I made at Big Steel Box, right? That's because the organization is so heart-led that and I enjoy that environment, right? So, and so it does good work in the I guess county, town, city. Kelowna is a city.
Yeah, it's a city.
It does great work there, and I saw a real focus on people, and I think technology can unlock people's potential, and there's an opportunity for that to happen now.
Awesome. Well, to both of you, I really appreciate your time. Brian, thanks so much for sharing your insights and your experience and being so open with us. It's just been amazing for me to listen to you and hear your everything that you've gone through. So thank you.
It was my pleasure, guys. Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, thanks, Brian. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, and thanks to you, Tony, as well.
Yeah, no worries.